Hello everyone, it's me, Emma. I am back again to tell you all about 3 books I'm going to read for the what are we at now? 30s. The 1930s. Which Chinese novels I'll be reading for the 1930s. For the first one, I actually do not have a hard copy. I will be reading it as an ebook on my phone through Libby, the love of my life. That is The Girl Who Played Go by Shan Sa. And this one was actually originally published in French, and so it is translated by Adriana Hunter. I read a little bit about the author. She was a Chinese author who moved to France and then started writing in French. This is a contemporary novel, like early 2000s, I want to say is what was published. So it'll be interesting to see a more recent take on the 1930s. I also don't know anything about Go, which is a significant game all throughout East Asia. And so I'd love to learn more about that. And it's pretty short, so it's going to be a pretty quick read just on my phone in any spare moments. So that's the first one I'm going to read. The second one I'm going to read is Fortress Besieged, which is such a dramatic title. This one is by Qian Chengshu, translated by Gene Kelly and Nathan K. Mao. This one was translated in 1979, but it was published in 1946. 1945, 1946. And I have read the introduction. It said that it was originally serialized. That will be really interesting. And that it also said that Fortress Besieged is not about war or an actual fortress. The fortress is marriage. That marriage is a fortress under siege, a fortress besieged. Everyone on the outside of the fortress is trying to get in, and the people inside the fortress really want to get out. So that'll be interesting. It is a monster. It is huge. Also, I'm terrified because it's big. It's a big book, and there's just so many small type and a ton of type on each page. I'll be hauling this around with me. Finally, I'm going to read Red Sorghum by Mo Yan. This one, some lore. A few years ago, how many years ago? I want to say 6 years ago, I tried to read this one. It was recommended to me by a Chinese person, and I started it. I got probably 50 pages into it, or something like that, and there was a really horrific, violent scene of a guy being, tortured in a really horrific, disgusting way, and I just couldn't handle that at the time. I was too sensitive. It was too much, and so I did not continue, but I think I can handle it this time. I think I can do it, and that I can skim if I need to. This one, Mo Yan has a Nobel Prize for literature. He's a prolific, very famous Chinese writer. Very excited about that one. This novel was published, it was translated in 1993, and then it was originally published in 1987, so a little more contemporary. Takes place, written 50 years after the actual events. What I also think is so interesting is that the translator's note says that this translation is based on the Taiwanese edition, which restores cuts made in the mainland Chinese edition. We're getting the full total version, completely uncensored. Oh, and then it is translated by Howard Goldblatt. This one I know for sure. So The Girl Who Played Go is it's about a girl who's playing Go. I don't think I actually looked up that much about what it is about. Fortress Besieged is about relationships and drama and marriage and stuff. This one is actually about the Second Sino-Japanese War that happened on mainland China in the 1930s. Really gets into the horror and violence of those events. I'd love to learn more about that. I really think it's valuable that the author is not shy about portraying the horror and the suffering of that war and how awful it was. On the back, there's a review from the New York Times Book Review that says, Mo Yan brilliantly and fondly recreates life with visceral writing that reeks of gunpowder, blood, and death. Let's see what the 30s has in store for me. I am a third of the way into The Girl Who Played Go, and I hate it. I hate it so much. There's so much that I don't like about it. It's boring. Nothing has really been happening except for just incredibly commonplace things that are kind of being played up as if they're supposed to be significant, but they're not. I think that the language itself, the writing, is incredibly dull, and I think that the events being portrayed are super stereotypical / unoriginal. So it alternates between the perspective of a Japanese soldier who's I think mostly in Manchuria, and a Chinese teenage girl. And so far in the story, this teenage girl occasionally plays Go. There are references to the fact that she can play Go, but mostly it's about her romance with a boy. It's entirely uninteresting. Like, nothing about it stands out to me at all. And then the Japanese soldier, I mean, it's about him, being a horrible soldier occupying China, and that's bad. But then all, like, most recently, it's just been like this plot line about him being obsessed with a geisha. And then he was, I think, I don't know, it sounded like he was supposed to marry the geisha, but then he was like really disturbed by how young she turned out to be when she took off her makeup. And that was so strange. And I feel kind of bad saying this, but like, even though this was written by a Chinese person who immigrated to France, it feels like if any person with just like a baseline understanding of East Asian stories just like wrote it off the top of their heads. Because all of the stuff with this Japanese soldier being obsessed with this geisha and all the details about the geishas are all just so, I want to say, stereotypical. There's just not much nuance in it. It's just gross man obsessed with weird sex worker who's so strange and exotic. Then the teenage girl's romance, like, nothing's really, it's like she's having this secret romance with this boy, and that's it. And that's just not at all like there's nothing more than that. Like, there's nothing interesting about it. And then the language is very much just like, he did this, she did this, she said that, she saw this was like that, da, 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 da. Like, it's just all of these incredibly plain, boring sentences. And then also something that's very odd is that it will switch back and forth between the Japanese soldier and the Chinese girl. It's still unclear how they're supposed to be connected, but it'll switch back and forth between them very quickly in a way that's kind of frustrating, because I can't like sustain my attention long enough to like care, because then it'll just switch back to the boring thing that the other person is doing. But then also sometimes it'll switch from, okay, there was kind of an active scene happening with the Chinese girl, and then it switches to the Japanese soldier, and it's him doing, for like 2 pages, something wildly mundane, like eating a meal or something, and then it switches back to her. And it's like, why do we need to see that at all? Ugh, I'm so over it. But I gotta read it. I committed reading it. Also, it's short, and it's not gonna take me very long. I don't know. I'm just gonna plow through. Ugh, so bad. Yeah, I thought that I don't remember what either main character's name was. The Chinese girl, I couldn't tell you a single thing about her except that she plays Go, and that's in the title. Couldn't tell you anything else about her as a person. The Japanese soldier is just a sex freak who, I don't know, like, I was so confused about what we were supposed to understand about him as a person, because he like goes to one of like the Japanese military torture prisons, and he's like disgusted by how the prisoners are being treated, but then says nothing and writes a report to his superiors saying that everything at the prison is great. I can accept that a person might do that, but why? What is the thought behind that kind of behavior, that kind of mindset? I'm just supposed to accept the fact that he's okay with perpetuating a system that he recognizes as morally reprehensible. I just no explanation of that at all. He's obsessed with all these different prostitutes, and then the man and the girl, their stories converge when they end up starting to meet to play Go in the park, because strangers will just meet up at the park and they'll all play Go together. And so they start meeting regularly to play Go. And his perspective talks about it as if he's falling in love with her, but objectively he's just sexually obsessed with her. And she just grows to trust him. She has no idea that he's Japanese because he speaks Chinese fluently. Of course he does. Massive coincidence. She just grows to trust him because they play so much Go. No other reason. Meanwhile, in the Chinese girl's life, she's sleeping with this guy and is close with his best friend who is in love with her, and so he's jealous that she's sleeping with the guy. And she's sleeping with him, but she doesn't want to marry him because she's an independent woman who don't need no man. Again, can't tell you anything else about her. She learns that somehow these 2 boys and all of her friends, without her knowing, had joined the Chinese resistance against the Japanese invasion, and then they all get captured and executed. There's no explanation of why she was not recruited, why she was the only one left out. It's not really implied that like she would necessarily have betrayed them or like didn't agree with their ideals. And then she goes to watch the execution, and right before they all get shot, the boy that she'd been sleeping with kisses a girl in the resistance that the main character had seen him talking to at like a gathering party hangout sort of. And she was like, oh, he's talking to that girl. And then he kisses her and they get shot. And I think that could potentially be an interesting thing to write about. She feels very betrayed by him, but he's also just been executed by a foreign invading force. So I think it would be interesting to explore those conflicting emotions, but instead she's just upset with him and is just like so furious that he betrayed her. There's just no exploration of how she doesn't talk about how she feels sad that he's been killed. It's so bizarre. And then I think the Japanese forces invade the town and she gets captured by soldiers and they're about to assault her, but one of the soldiers turns out to be the Japanese soldier that was the other main character who's been playing Go with her in the park. And so in order to save her from being assaulted by this group of soldiers, he shoots her and then shoots himself, and the book ends. Spoilers. Whoops, sorry, don't read this book. It's so dumb. You don't care about spoilers. And that's the end. And I thought it was so dumb. I did not like it. Also, I didn't learn anything about Go. I did not understand how things worked when they were playing. I also didn't fully understand why they had to be playing Go, like why that was relevant to anything that was happening. And then I read a review on Goodreads of someone else who said that they had just read a book about Go by a Japanese author, and that book actually talks a lot about Go and how Go works, and that it seems like the author of The Girl Who Played Go doesn't actually know about anything about Go. That's what this reviewer said. And I learned nothing. I learned nothing about Go. I didn't think that it was a very interesting vehicle for the interactions between the Chinese girl and the Japanese man. I thought that it was all weird and gross and pointless, and I hated it. So that's that one. And now I'm halfway through Fortress Besieged. I look insane carrying this around at work, like to read when I have downtime, because it looks like the freaking Bible. Like, look at this. It's bigger than my head. So, Fortress Besieged is, so it's a satire, which I thought, when I think satire, I think of something that's fairly absurd and really presenting a lot of extreme situations. This one is more, I don't know, I would more just describe as a comedy, because I don't think the things that happen are particularly exaggerated. It's more just like there are a lot of scenarios or conversations that are very funny. Unfortunately, it's so long. It's like, what, 360 pages, I want to say? I'd say if this was formatted more traditionally, it would be a lot longer than 360 pages. So it's long. The pacing's very slow. There's not much going on. And so even there are points where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really funny. And I love connecting with historical literature like that. Like, this was published so long ago and written so long ago. And so I think it's fun to connect with the sense of humor of an author across time and across countries. But the pace of the story drags it down so much that I can't enjoy it, really, which is really frustrating. So the main character is a man who studies abroad in the UK, and then he buys a fake degree from America to try and impress people. He goes back home to Beijing, probably. I'm gonna guess. Everything's in Beijing. He befriends this woman on the boat home and then meets her cousin, falls in love with her cousin. But the woman from the boat falls in love with him. He is not in love with her. He rejects her, but then her cousin rejects him. He's so sad that he accepts this job offer to become a professor at a university in this really remote university with a friend. Then there's this super long part of him and the friend and a couple of other people trying to get to this university that's in the middle of nowhere. But the war, like, at this point, Japan has invaded. So that's messing up the roads, and it takes them forever and way more money than they were expecting to get to the university. That just took forever, just for them to get to the university. It took forever, and nothing was happening. They were just going and then getting off and then going and getting off, and oh, it was so difficult to get through. And it's also, people have asked me about this at work. I'm hauling around this huge thing. They'll be like, oh, what are you reading? And I'll be like, oh, it's Fortress Besieged. It's a 1930s Chinese novel. And I'll be like, oh, okay, is it good? And I'm like, not really. They're like, why are you reading it? I'm like, because I do YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, but don't look it up, please, dear God. Now he's at the university, and there's a bunch of drama between the professors. The introduction was also really long and dull, and it said that the first half was about something, but the second half was supposed to be kind of like a satire on marriage. But we are well past the halfway point. Not well past. We're past the halfway point, and he still hasn't gotten married. He's still kind of a disaster of a person. Because when he got to the university, the president of the university had basically automatically clocked that his degree was fake. So he was like, you can't be a full professor. You have to be like an associate professor or like a guest lecturer. You have to be like a lecturer or something. And so that sucks for him. That's everything that's going on so far. So it's just a lot of personal drama. there are a lot of really there are a lot of really funny parts, and a lot of the writing is really clever and has like really funny, interesting metaphors for stuff. But it's just so long and so drawn out and so slow that it's been really hard to get through. So I'm not having a great time with this one either. I'm right now I'm thinking 2 stars because like there are redeeming qualities, but I'm not having a good time. It is past midnight. I have I have no other time to fit this in. And so I'm going to tell you guys all about Fortress Besieged while I do my skincare routine. Wow, look, real vlogging. That girl. Look at this. So I finished Fortress Besieged, and so there was all this drama after the main character became a professor at this rural university where the faculty was nothing but drama and constantly trying to get each other's jobs and get each other in trouble and like cause scandals, and it was just a nightmare for him. And then he kind of got engaged by accident all of a sudden, where there had been all these rumors that he was going to get engaged to someone, and these two other professors saw him with like a young female lecturer and just like assumed that they must have been courting this whole time, that they're engaged now, like just a massive assumption, and they just went along with it and got engaged and then got married. And then their marriage was absolutely miserable, and they were super mean to each other the whole time, and their families hated each other, and they could never agree on anything, and were just awful. And at the end, I thought that they were getting that, like, it was like, and this is all a disaster, it's over. And so I thought it was like implying they were going to get a divorce, but then it also seemed to imply that they were going to make up. I don't know, but they were just miserable and a terrible match because they clearly like barely even knew each other and didn't even really like each other, and just like kind of stumbled into feeling obligated to get engaged or something. I don't even know. And so yeah, the last portion of the book was just them being married and miserable, which is the message of the whole book, I guess, is that everyone's so eager to get married, but then everyone's miserable when they get married. And then it ended. There was no story, really, which is fine. I don't need a story necessarily. I love a story. I love stories, but I don't need one in order to enjoy a book. But there really weren't any interesting ideas that the book was trying to convey that I could really understand. And so I didn't really get any good ideas out of it. And then also, like, I didn't care about any of the characters. Occasionally, I really liked the writing. I thought it was very clever, very interesting, often funny. But just overall, as an experience, didn't like it. Gave it 2 stars. Also, it's just so long. It was so long. But then, after I rated it and gave my review on Goodreads, I saw that like the top review on Goodreads is from a Chinese person who says that Fortress Besieged is one of their favorite novels in the original Chinese version, but then they decided to read the English translation to see what that was like, which, wow, commitment. Like, I'm going to read the same book both in my first language and in another language. But also, they just gave a lot of insight into why Fortress Besieged, hold on, sorry, is valued so much by Chinese society, and that it says in the review that people love it not because of the story, but because of the writing and how technically skilled the writer is, how clever the writing is. There's a lot of wordplay, a lot of double meaning, a lot of nuance, and that most of that is lost in translation. The reviewer is also very kind and says that the translators did the best they could. There's just no way to translate this book in a way that will really come across the same way in another language, that the original Chinese just cannot be replicated. So I guess it was just doomed from the start. Yeah, because I didn't really care about the characters, no story, no ideas. Apparently, there's a lot more ideas coming through in the original Chinese. Wasn't a great time. Wasn't a great time for me. Then there were like some other reviews being like, "This is the best book ever," that appeared to be from Westerners. So who knows? Who knows? But not for me. Not this one. So that was Fortress Besieged. Good night. I'm about 100 pages away from the end of Red Sorghum. I don't know if you can see that. I'm like 3/4 of the way in. It's so beautifully written. So beautiful. Incredibly descriptive. It's very lifelike. It really puts me in the place and situations that are happening. There have been multiple scenes where I make like a like as I'm reading silently, I'll go oh gosh. And it's not just the scene where a guy gets skinned alive at the beginning. There are more that are really bad. That's just what I signed up for. That's what happens when you read a book about a Japanese invasion, unfortunately. So it's been rough. So far, there has been, so the narrator is someone closer to modern day, probably close to the time when this was written in like the 80s, and he is talking about the other characters in relation to how they're related to him. So the main character is his father, so it keeps being like father this, father did that, and then it also talks about granddad and grandma. So I think that's a really interesting narration style. And so far there has been an initial battle between, I had a group of local bandits, including father and granddad, and a unit, a battalion, a group of Japanese soldiers, and they win. Then it's a little unclear, but I think that the Japanese military comes back and basically massacres the village. Then, after everyone's been massacred, father and granddad and now mother are fighting against hordes of hundreds of stray dogs whose owners have been murdered in the war and who have been developing a taste for human flesh because they survive off of the corpses of the dead. Am I gonna get blocked? Is this video gonna get like flagged by YouTube? Anyway, that was a really long sequence where it's just them fighting dogs with grenades, and I wasn't 100% certain what the purpose of that sequence was. And now I don't even know what's happening now. Oh gosh, what's even it's just, oh, now it's 2 years. So it's takes place mostly in 1939 during the Second Sino-Japanese War. Now it's like 2 years later when they're finally having a funeral for those who died in the massacre and the battles and stuff. So that's what's happening here at the end. It is so heavy, so dark. Definitely just dives right into the horrors of war. But there's also definitely a level of humor. Like, it's not a funny book. Like, there are just very human moments that are funny. And then all of the relationships and conversations are just they feel very real. It's very absorbing and horrifying. This is definitely the kind of book that you would only read once. It's such an interesting experience of like, I'm not having a good time, but I still want to read it. I'm in awe of the writing, and that's been captured so well by the translation. I feel absorbed in the emotions and experiences of the characters, and it's all awful, and I kind of want it to be over. I do suspect I will give this one a high rating though, just because it's so gorgeous and just captures the humanity in all of the horror, you know? I'd like it to be over, but I'd also like to read a bunch of other stuff that this guy has written. So, you know that kind of experience. So that's how this one is going so far. Significantly better than the last two. The last two, I wanted it to be over because it was unpleasant to like it was just such a bad experience. This one is a good experience, but it feels bad. Does that make sense? I finished read Sorghum. It was horrific. Everything was just horrifying and awful. Beautifully written. Things just kept getting worse. Everything that I said in my last clip, I still stand by. Still all the same. But then in the last part, there was a lot about not just the violence being wrought upon the villagers by the Japanese, but also the cruelty and violence that the family members that the book is about would inflict on each other, whether that's physical violence, emotional violence, betrayal, all these things. And that felt like a purposeful contrast of just this human condition of all of the things that people do to each other, which was very striking. There were also some really interesting elements of the supernatural. Not a lot at all, just little sprinkles, like a dying woman who a few years before the invasion predicted the destruction of the village, as she was in her death throes. Or I don't know, I feel like all the dog battle stuff was probably pretty supernatural, because it was talking about the dogs as if they were strategic leaders. So that was kind of supernatural, and that was so interesting. I didn't fully understand why a lot of time was spent on certain scenes or interactions, but it did just leave me with this gut feeling of devastation, of all that we do to each other. I gave it 4 stars just because it was so impactful and so stunningly written. I really felt like I was there. I was experiencing that. Both the place, the beautiful setting, but then also the horrors. Experiencing the horrors. So I'd give it 4 stars because it was gorgeous, but I don't think I would necessarily recommend it. unless you're ready for reading about the impact of human cruelty and suffering. That and like all of the news that's going on right now, oh my gosh, I just need a break. I'm reading some silly books that don't matter. So it's so bad. Overall, I did not appreciate 2 of the 3 books. But it was still interesting to see how these 3 books portraying the 1930s approached the Sino-Japanese War, because Red Sorghum was about civilians being attacked. The Girl Who Played Go was about Chinese rebel organizing. And then Fortress Besieged was about rich people who are vaguely impacted by the conflict but kind of just go about their privileged lives anyway. So it was interesting to get kind of that kind of holistic view of the whole thing. That was fascinating that the war was portrayed so differently in all 3 books, but was still a presence in all of them. It wasn't, yeah, it really wasn't a huge presence in Fortress Besieged, but they did mention it. I was like, oh yeah, that's going on somewhere. And I need a break. I need a break from the horrors. So that's all for today. That's all for the 30s. I probably will never read anything about 1930s China again because there's not a ton out there, and also the horrors. Hope you have less horrors in your life today. Goodbye.